Welcome to E-commerce Fastlane, episode 102.
Welcome to E-commerce Fastlane, the podcast show to help you build, launch, grow, and scale a wildly successful e-commerce company. Listen to real conversations with proven practical strategies and success stories. Learn how to generate more traffic, more sales, more profit, and customer lifetime value for your Shopify store. And now, your host and e-commerce entrepreneur, Steve Hutt.
This episode is brought to you by the team at Rewind. You know something? Accidents can happen, and they can have a major financial impact on your business. What happens if you install an app and it messes up your theme? Or you upload a product catalog with errors? Or even worse, a store collaborator deletes product images by mistake? The common myth is that Shopify has a backup that you can use when something goes wrong with your store. Untrue. Myth busted. Shopify has no native backups. So what do? You use Rewind to protect your store with automated backups. Rewind should be the first app you install to protect your store against human error, misbehaving apps, or collaborators gone bad. It's like having your very own magic undo button. The Rewind app is trusted by over 30,000 businesses, from side hustlers to the biggest online retailers like Gatorade or Movement Watches. And best of all, respond to any of their welcome emails and mention the E-commerce Fastlane podcast, and you'll get your first month of backups absolutely free. Protect your business, get peace of mind with Rewind backups. Download the app today from the Shopify App Store or by visiting rewind.io. So hey there, it's Steve, and welcome back to the E-commerce Fastlane podcast. Now, if this is your first time listening, this is an e-commerce show where we have honest and transparent conversations about building and thriving with your store powered by Shopify or Shopify Plus. Now, new episodes are available each week with your favorite podcast player through iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and Spotify. Or you can also sign up online at ecommercefastlane.com and be notified when a new show is being released. Now, my guest in today's episode is Simon Poulton, who is the Vice President of Digital Intelligence at an agency called W Promote. And they actually are the largest independent digital marketing agency in the US. And they take their think like a challenger mantra very seriously. It's quite interesting when you go to their website and read all about their brand positioning. They really are there to challenge the status quo and to drive more results and steal market share for clients. It's very interesting how they do it. You know, and as leaders, they say that, W Promote uses profit-driven marketing approach to increase customer lifetime value, impact the bottom line. They mentioned, why outspend the competition when you can outsmart them? So it's very interesting angles of how they are able to attack a market. And they offer lots of great services too, from paid media to SEO and social and email, and both strategy, execution of those strategies, including analytics. Hi, Simon. Welcome to E-commerce Fastlane.
Hi, Steve. Thanks for having me on the show.
Oh, my pleasure. I'm glad we synced calendars. I know we're in an interestingly challenging time right now with the pandemic, this work from home and social distancing, and just the fundamental shifts that are happening right now in online commerce, traditional commerce. But let's talk first on a high level. Like, what does W Promote do, and what sort of problem or problems, I should say, does the company solve for Shopify brands?
Would love to dive into that. So W Promote, we take a profit-driven approach to performance marketing. So we are really hyper-focused on growth, but not just growth at the cost of an infinite amount of money, but really sustainable growth for organizations that are really looking to steal the market share, as you alluded to in your introduction there. So we really like to think about the way that we approach granular data extraction, this idea of signal resilience, creation of paid media feedback loops to really help drive these paths that we're able to essentially go after new customers that perhaps maybe hadn't even been exposed to organizations before. I think in particular, though, when we think about for brands with Shopify Plus, we've actually developed very recently a free template that it's for Google Tag Manager. It's available through the official Google Tag Manager template gallery. And that template actually allows you to expose the e-commerce variables within a website. So obviously, there's a lot of data that these pixels are asking for. If you've ever tried to implement a Google Ads or a Facebook Ads pixel, they're asking for a lot of data, but that data is not necessarily easily available or persistent. So our solution here actually allows anyone, again, it's free. You can just go out there, check out tagmanager.google.com. They've got a great gallery on their site. It actually allows you to implement that on your site and expose that data. So it's a very easy process.
Beautiful. I'll make sure I update that link in the show notes for those listening in today. Makes sense to grab that template, especially if you're a Shopify Plus merchant, and get that added on. So let's dig into a little bit of the founder's journey. I'm always fascinated about why, in this case, agencies, like why they build what they build. Why do they choose to solve these sort of problems of commerce merchants? And are you able to share maybe what you believe uniquely positions the founding team, I guess, in two parts? Like, number one, to have the desire, and number two, to have the expertise to create this marketing agency?
WPromote was founded by a gentleman named Mike Mothner. Funny enough, the founding team is Mike Mothner, Mike Stone, and Mike Block. So I think
Wow.
if your name was Mike, you were able to join the founding team.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
No, it's a great story in that Mike was actually doing an internship at a very high-profile financial firm, and they asked him during the interview about what he was doing, and he said, "Well, I've started this company in my dorm room," and they said, "Do you really believe in it?" And he said, "Well, yeah, I do." I think to a young, impressionable individual at that point in time, he started to question himself. And actually, at that point in the interview, he said, "All right, you know what? Thank you for your time. This company is what I'm going to do." And that passion, that the idea that very much a self-starter organization, so anyone in the organization does have an opportunity to take on a leadership role, and if they have the vision for the future, that is certainly, I think, the ethos that comes through both Mike, well, all of the Mikes really, but in particular, the mindset is one of understanding the financial constraints and needs of organizations and how that interacts with the digital world. I think a lot of folks get into digital marketing because, well, at least historically, it's been exciting. And for some folks, it's been a very low-cost way to acquire customers. The big picture at WPromote has always been, how do we think about growth and having a core understanding of ultimately the more granular controls we have over marketing initiatives, not just those that are traditionally digital, but also these new emerging mediums like connected TV and so forth. How can we exert those granular controls, and how can we ultimately drive growth opportunities for the organizations that we do work with?
So let's dig into something specifically to Shopify Plus brands, because we talk about paid media and just the efficiency factors and just like how to drive better results. Like you're using the word granular data. Can you expand a little bit more on that? I mean, I have a cursory knowledge of what that means. I think people listening today would just like a little deeper dive into how can paid media become more efficient, or how can it drive better results for brands?
There's a lot of things that can be granular. And I think if you look at the historic context of digital advertising, it sort of went from a very basic infrastructure where you could essentially buy keywords, you could do some active manipulation, and it evolved over time. And Google started to, of course, Google really started a lot of this, but what they started to do was to provide every single lever you could imagine available on the platform. And that's great if you've got an infinite number of arms, an infinite number of hours in the day. So we did start to see somewhat of an algorithmic approach from various vendors in the space. But then the pivot occurred, and the pivot is a really huge one, and that is Google and Facebook have more data than we can even comprehend. So of course they expose a lot through the platforms, but they even have so much more on their back end. They have these really tight user identity graphs, and there's so much that goes into that. So as we think about the future of digital marketing and digital media buying in particular, the granularity of the signals that we're able to send back into the platforms is what is key. So historically, you may be able to pull levers on the front end. Now it's more about having an ideal structure and then ultimately understanding the bidding landscape that we're going up against. But it's more than that. It's the idea of, well, are you actually acquiring new or customers, or are these returning customers? So there's a lot that goes into the concept of a conversion is not equal. You may have 100 conversions come through your website, and perhaps it's a prospecting campaign. You're trying to get all these great new eyeballs on what you're doing. You're trying to sell through there, and then you find that actually half of them were already returning customers. That is not uncommon. We actually see that quite a bit, and perhaps in part because of certain exclusion rules that exist. But a lot of it comes down to the fact that we're not passing that data back. Google doesn't make it that easy for us. So when we think about this idea of splitting the pixel. There's a lot of value in that concept. This idea that I would like to send two different conversion goals: one for new customers, one for returning customers. And I'd even like to take it a step further. Every customer that perhaps you have a customer that comes through and they spend $150. That's great. You're excited. And another customer comes through and they also spend $150. There are differences between these customers. We talk a lot about lifetime value and this idea
Right.
that there's a big difference between new and returning, but there's a big difference even on the type of products that are being purchased and the relative gross margin. I think these are things that in the mind of a lot of digital marketers, they can forget at times, and they really look at the bottom line and go, hooray, we drove $1,000 in revenue. But
Yeah. Yeah.
if your margin is razor thin on that, then you may need to sell 10,000 to make back the cost of doing business. And
Right.
I said, I think that's an area where we want to get more granular too. So one thing that we do with our clients is allow for lookup tables to exist at the SKU level with their margin data and the cost and then price that's being paid by consumers. So obviously you may have variability during sales periods. You may have variability at different times of the year or even in different states. And that is really important context. It's important context that we talk about, and it's very hard to do this just manually as a human to work it out. But when you can send the signal back and say, okay, yes, it's $150 revenue, but the gross profit on this was $40. That is the signal that we want to send back, because the future is what we want to optimize toward. We want to find more of the new customers with a high return for us, not just a high revenue. And I think that's where the next generation of digital marketing is going to be focuses on the granularity of the signals we send back to the machines.
You're definitely preaching to the choir here. I mean, all day long, I have these sort of conversations, and very similar to what you're talking about, the whole attribution model, and how once again, people are not coming in at top of funnel anymore. They're coming in, and it's multi-touch points. And the challenge is, from what I see, is that they're giving Facebook, last click attribution, even though it was word of mouth, or they heard it on a podcast, or it was through some other method. And there are tactics and things that you can have, like post-purchase, and send a survey through. How did you hear about us after you made a sale? Just to almost to align, where your ad spend is, if it's in alignment with how much money you're spending, as to where the data is showing where the customers are actually coming from. But so that just more validates or invalidates where you believe your spend is. But trying to figure this whole, this life cycle marketing and getting cohorts of people, I think at this point, most brands are conscious of the whole new versus returning. But I think there's a lot that have thought about it, but don't know how the tech could work when you factor in cost of goods. And then, as you're calling it, almost a feedback loop of getting back in to the machine to saying, okay, wait a second, we have this sort of budget and these ad creatives, and here's what we're trying to do. But that's all relevant based on the profitability. I think that's really interesting way of looking at it. And you're the first agency partner that's actually paused for a moment and actually shared that sort of intel.
I appreciate the fact that we're, I think, driving this narrative forward. But I think you sort of hit it on the head there at the top with the idea that a lot of brands are, of course, we're all aware about new versus returning, but it's what do we do with it? How do we actually action on that? And I think far too often it's happening in the realm of the CFO, and you hear about it at the end of the quarter, and you go, all right, well, new customer acquisition was down this quarter, and you go, why couldn't we have done something about that sooner? There's huge opportunities. I think especially now with the disruption that we're seeing out there in the world, certain brands turning off and turning back on, and in terms of their paid media, there's a lot of opportunity out there for going after new, but also just to better understand how your attention is shaped, and really having an understanding of, well, what will you pay for a new customer versus what will you pay for a returning customer? And it can't just be at the point of being the blended average. We actually have to know within the platform, and then we have to set these targets, because that's how we can best optimize these platforms. And I think a lot of folks do have bad experiences with the machine learning aspects of Google, and they, you hear these horror stories, right, where people will say, yeah, I set my budget for $10 and it spent $100. I don't know how this happens, and it's terrifying, quite honestly. But when you actually stop to think, and I'm very fortunate that I've got a fantastic team of data scientists that I work with. But when you stop and think and you talk through the concept with them, it makes sense. It's learning, and so you should expect mistakes, with the outcome being better than anyone else. So if you can weather that, and you know how to feed that in, those mistakes, and you guiding the platforms, that is so powerful. And honestly, I don't think that many folks are doing this. So I think if this is something you get started on now, you'll certainly be ahead of the game.
Another challenge I find too is brands that are in the subscription market. I have some in the subscription box market, in supplements, in the wine business, recurring revenues. And that's obviously the holy grail of commerce, and just the anticipation of that revenue and just lifetime value that comes out of that. How does W Promote look at subscription companies as a whole, as far as, is it the exact same method again of a feedback loop, profitability, or do you consider lifetime value? Or do you think about the churn rate and how to reactivate people that are at risk in that? Just would love to hear your feedback on how you manage these subscription companies.
So I think with the subscription companies in particular, there's a lot of variance that does exist for the brands that have a month-to-month subscription. Of course, when we think about this month-to-month subscription, that's certainly very much the most in vogue business model, and it's a great one to get to if you can acquire someone and just have this recurring tap of revenue come through. Certainly, we think about this in definitely the angle of lifetime value. We utilize Peter Fader's "buy till you die" model for our lifetime value predictions, which we find to be very, very accurate, and it has been very helpful for a number of our clients. But the thought of the feedback loop there is a very key one. And actually, what we do look to do is, when we have that recurring revenue, we do look to ingest that back into the platforms as well as a secondary revenue point. So ultimately, what we're doing is not just looking at the audiences, but we're also integrating the actual revenue that we are seeing from them. At an overarching level, though, the beauty of predictive lifetime value, and when you can work with a predictive lifetime value model, we've actually got a really great article on our website all about exactly how to do it. Our team put it out there because I was basically saying, well, hey, if anyone wants to do it, let's give them the keys to the castle. But I think it certainly requires someone who knows their way around Python. But I digress.
Yeah.
Going back to the core idea there, though, is the outputs that we get from that model, we actually are using them for clustering, and clustering the audiences, not just into a high, medium, low, but clustering into individuals that look the same, and then creating lookalikes off them. And when I say look the same, I mean in terms of their behavioral propensity. So that's been a really powerful model for us to go after new customer acquisition, and then to also do behavioral isolation based on potential churn points. So those are certainly signals that we're integrating. And I've always been a big fan of trying to, from day one, when you start working with a new company, of course, you meet with the CMO. But we also make a point of meeting with the CFO, and I think a lot of companies overlook that and worry about it too, because maybe, this person doesn't really talk digital marketing, so I'm not quite in the same realm as them. But I find it goes a really long way to educate a CFO that you're working with around how you're looking to do this, and then find out what data they have available and how you can better integrate that into your models to ultimately grow that business. And that's what it all comes down to at the end of the day, is how do you align with the financial goals of the organization.
Very cool. Thank you very much for sharing that. That's and I'll make sure I add a few of those links in the show notes for those that want to dig a little deeper into this. I was thinking a lot as you're speaking here. So we have this data collected. We have all about the customers and the website users and their experience and stuff like that. What sort of things can brands do once they have this data about the customers and they understand maybe how they're interacting with the website? How does W Promote want to use that data now?
That's a great question. I think that actually aligns very closely with this idea of predicted lifetime value cohorts. But certainly, what do you do when you have those? There's the one path of taking them and adding them to the platform, but there's also an enrichment path. And I think you'd be surprised by the ability to enrich data that does exist out there, even for very small brands. There's a number of platforms. The Trade Desk, for example, is one where you can port your audiences in via LiveRamp, as long as you have at least 1,000 people in that audience, and they'll give you some insights on that audience. So demographic insights, some psychographic insights, a lot of things you can get from there. I think after the 2016 elections, we saw a lot of these things start to get very restricted, and I'm certainly an advocate for more privacy there. But there's something to be said for actually understanding who your customers are, not just that they have similar behavioral traits, but understanding regionally where they are and who they are as people, and seeing if you can adapt your marketing messaging there. So I think it plays in both a technical optimization capacity as well as a creative messaging optimization capacity. And of course, once you have those two things figured out, I think that's at the core of digital marketing. But sometimes we'll find ourselves going way too far down a technical rabbit hole and forget at the end of the day that marketing is about people. And you can reach, I can reach anyone I want right now, but if I've got nothing of value to say to them or to engage them, that's not very helpful.
Right. It's a good pivot because I'm thinking also now about just analytics and just some of the challenges that can come with analytics in general. Literally, I would say a few times a month, I have brands asking me, even though they have e-commerce tracking turned on or they're running Google Tag Manager, they still find, especially in subscription sites, they feel they have to have other apps and different things trying to sync over different things. It is quite a cluster. And so I would love, since you deal with so many brands, I would just love to hear what sort of common problems that you see, and then are there solutions and workarounds and resources that people could, either have W Promote help them with, and or resources where people can go and do a more of a self-serve model or audit of their analytics?
Absolutely. I think there's a number of challenges that we see all the time. And I do want to caveat this by saying I'm a big fan of Shopify and everything that goes on there, everything in the ecosystem. There's so many amazing tools, but we do see that there are limitations with the default Google Analytics integration. Sometimes when we see organizations just using a default implementation without thinking too hard about it, maybe their developers haven't quite coded things in a analytics-friendly capacity. What we end up seeing is they will run into issues sometimes with duplicate transaction tracking. That is not uncommon. In fact, we've seen it up to 20% on some websites. So you end up seeing they grossly inflate their numbers within their analytics platform, and then you look at the back end and you're like, that's not what happened. Certainly, when sometimes we'll see a misalignment of revenue variables. This is particularly true if there are perhaps state-specific taxes on certain websites, where maybe it bumps down one line and that changes how variables get picked up. Right. It's not that machines are not intelligent, but it's that they do exactly what we tell them to do. So when you say look at the fourth line, it's always going to look at the fourth line. Further, I'd say that we're also seeing a lot of issues out there with PII, this idea of personal identifiable information being tracked. That is going to be a very, very big topic moving forward. I'm certainly concerned about the number of brands I'm seeing that violate both GDPR and CCPA, as well as any of the ones that are coming down the road. There's a lot of things we need to consider there when it comes to the exposure of that information. At its core, I think having a fundamental understanding of event tracking, what are you looking to actually understand about users on your website? It's not just that they enter your website and then they purchase or they don't. There's a lot more that happens in there. It's quite honestly amazing how many people don't even use their own website and aren't aware of some of the issues that they are facing. But we even implement things like 404 trackers, which are incredibly helpful. A URL is shared word of mouth, even perhaps on a podcast or on the radio, and we're relying on the user there to actually type that in accurately. That doesn't always happen, and you can see a lot of 404s come through there, and that's heartbreaking because you think, you've done so much work to get these people here. They're an engaged audience, and then you give them nothing. And if you don't have analytics in place to actually track that and understand this is happening, you'll never know. There's no one going around going 404s are happening everywhere. I think if you ask the average website owner right now how many 404s happen per day on your website, they'd have no idea. It's a very simple thing to track, but it is also something that is not necessarily within the scope of what you think about in day-to-day business. So I would absolutely recommend for anyone who's looking to get deeper into this is there's I think there's a self-learning route if you're interested. And I think analytics impacts not just digital marketing, but all aspects of business. But then there's also organizations like ourselves and many others out there that really focus on taking a structured approach to, one, understanding your business goals, two, understanding the architecture of what actually needs to be implemented, and then three, actually doing the implementation. So you're not just reporting analytics in one place, but you're also echoing the same analytics, the same tracking solutions across your paid media pixels. So we talked about conversion granularity before, but there's so much more to this in terms of understanding view content granularity. There's a lot of behavioral traits, understanding when people are having trouble with forms on your website. Those should still be noted as conversion points, not necessarily to optimize toward, but to understand the roadblocks that you're putting in front of these folks who are very excited to try and transact on your website. I don't think there's any greater sin when you own a website than having a poor checkout experience, because you've already got people going, this is the product I want, I'm ready to go, let's do this. And then you get to the checkout experience and they go, well, it wasn't designed for mobile device. And
Right.
that's
Yeah.
that's $100 out the door right away.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me. I tell a lot of the brands that I manage trying to understand the customer journey through the website. The analytics is one side of it, but the actual customer live on the website, you're wondering why they're dropping off,
Yeah.
and there's lots of things that it can be. I highly recommend people to at least try Hotjar or Full Story as a
Hmm.
solution. I'll put these links in the show notes. There's some free solutions available right there for some session tracking, like recordings, even rage clicks on things that just aren't working correctly. Just
Yeah.
overall the user experience. It's really, really shocking what you actually get to see. I know Full Story's got a plan like 1,000 recordings per month for free. It's an absolute no-brainer. Or if you are concerned about your conversion rate or your lifetime value or just the overall digital journey of your customers, as soon as they land on inside pages, you'd be shocked more than maybe the homepage. And then how do they flow through the website? This is one way of really visually following the customer along. It almost seems creepy, but at the end of the day, it really does help you see what other people are doing live on your website, and it really can help.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've got a number of our clients that actually use multiple of the solutions that you just referenced. I even think one that's great is usertesting.com, just because you can go and
Yes.
have a real user go through your website
Yep.
and just tell you, hey, I don't know where to click. And you may think that clicking the add to cart button is the easiest thing in the world, but then you find out that they weren't expecting a cart option. They were expecting a actual word that says add to cart. You can never make a website that'll satisfy everyone, but you can certainly optimize those experiences. And I think these begin with, yes, talking about, well, how people are using it. And then from there, well, let's track those interactions. So it's really utilizing this, I think, qualitative insight to start generating quantitative insight. And then from there, understand if you're actually able to optimize against it.
Right. You got it. So, Simon, this show has a diverse range of listeners, and I'm sure you can appreciate that. I mean, Shopify core brands, there's probably 1 million of them, and there's 6 or more thousand brands that make their home on Shopify Plus. And so those brands that are in their early stage, it's probably a side hustle. And, they probably are still working 9 to 5 doing their thing, but they are selling product and things are starting to get some traction in the market. From your angle and from what you see, what sort of advice would you give these early stage entrepreneurs?
I think that's a great question, and actually, I do want to share a quick note that on my team at W Promote, one of my directors, he's a great director in the analytics world. His name's Remy, and he actually runs a side hustle company that sells stickers on Shopify. And we
Oh,
have a
very
lot
cool.
of we have a lot of conversations about the fact that he's an early stage e-commerce entrepreneur, and I think he brings a lot of really great insights to the table from that experience and exposure to actually some of our larger clients. I think because he can be so nimble and he can pivot so quickly. At its core, though, and the way that he thinks about it, and what I really love is that it is about using data to guide the decisions of your website. I think far too often we fall into the trap of saying, "Oh, I just want it to look nice." I know it seems like it's a lot of work to go out and
Yeah.
get all this data, but you can actually just have a very simple default integration just to understand things like bounce rate. Are people just coming and just not understanding where to go and leaving? Even to understand the user journeys through at least a page level, I think there's a lot that happens there. And the best tool, if really not wanting to invest a lot in digital marketing to bring people in, is to focus on your conversion rate optimization. I think that is so key. So just understanding the key areas on the website, those milestones in the customer journey, and really just don't be afraid to dive into Google Analytics, even if you don't think that you know much about it. And honestly, there's so many learning resources out there about it as well. And it doesn't have to be something that dominates your life. It can absolutely be something that you use and you just try and learn something new every day. I think one of the coolest things that Google Analytics has done of late is they've actually included a Google Analytics intelligence component in there. And this is really designed for folks that don't spend a lot of time within the platform. And you can just go in and it's kind of like Ask Jeeves back in the day. You
Yeah.
can just go in and semantically search and say, what was my bounce rate 2 weeks ago on a Tuesday? And it
I
will tell
see.
you. And it will compare it to the previous Tuesdays. Those reports, I could probably find them in about 5 or 6 clicks. But if you can just type it out and you don't quite know where to go on the platform, that's a great way to get introduced to these areas. And you can just start asking these questions to find out more about your business because the data is being collected.
Life of learning. I totally agree with you on that. I'll put links in the show notes too. There's quite a few free courses out there with the kind of intro to Google Analytics. There are a lot of Shopify partners too who have created some great programs and even some apps and things that can help people have a Google Tag Manager correctly installed on your site to make sure that there's not that disparity that you talked about by just running the regular Google Analytics. When you have the e-commerce version enabled and running in Tag Manager, plus there's a few other tweaks and potentially even third parties connecting and making GA the single source of truth, which a lot of people want have a single source of truth for data. Typically, it's GA instead of a data warehouse. Just depends on the maturity of the brand, I suppose. But most brands that I manage, GA is their single source of truth, bringing in their Shopify data, maybe recharge payments or bold cashiers, a third party payment gateways, and any kind of the social channels. All of that comes into GA for session tracking and lifetime value and just noting a lot of that stuff. I will put links in the show notes for that, and you'll be able to enjoy some of these free courses and things like that. So that's great advice for early stage merchants. Now, what about those that are in the mid-market to enterprise? They would likely have a small team, definitely eager to grow and scale. They might be outsourcing some of their digital marketing efforts to a partner. What's kind of the best advice that you can share today, and how could that assist the CFO, the executive team, or how could that assist the marketing team?
So I think a lot of these organizations, and I know the ones you're talking about very well, they're scaling and they're been growing from being very small and they're growing rapidly. They may have no time. The nature of organizations growing, we always think, oh, well, they're just loading on lots of people. And it actually might just be that the same person who was doing everything before is now doing 3 or 4 different jobs. That's a very big challenge. But I always like to think about the idea that best time to plant a tree was yesterday. Or sorry, 10 years ago even. The second best time is today. And I think we should take that approach to data. So data collection for the future. Even if we don't think that we have time for these things, it's worthwhile to take a break and just think, in 5 years' time, what is going to be the competitive edge of my business? And really, it's going to be, well, there's a few things, but they all come back to data. The nature of audience targeting, understanding the scope of personalization, understanding even future product demands. A lot of these coming through data. And while you can provide surveys and get this other qualitative data through, oftentimes folks don't actually know what they want. They show it through their behavior more so than what they actually say. And I think that's very interesting. So we talk a lot about this idea of the 360-degree view of customers. There's a lot of increasing acquisition costs out there around going after new folks. So we want to be very targeted with that. And I think one of the best things you can do right now would be to look into CDP options, custom data platforms. I think that there's a lot of opportunity there. And really just make sure you've got your data housekeeping in check. If you've always been complaining about, hey, Google Analytics, we kind of use it. I don't know how much I trust it. That is not acceptable 5 years from now, right? Like, I mean, it's barely acceptable today, but 5 years from now, if you don't have data, you don't have an understanding of the business, and you'll be disrupted so easily. Not like the past where I think you can just have a great product and they will come. You really have to be very actively seeking out these individuals, because we do have such a globalized way we look at these things. And really the data is at the heart of it, and making sure that it's clean, it's available, and most importantly, that it is thinking about the future and how scalable it can be. So making sure you've got a great customer database and a great web analytics stack. Those are the 2 big things you need to focus on.
I will also add a few more links into the show notes for that sort of stuff, just to kind of dig a little deeper, because we could probably go off on a tangent and chat for an hour about customer data platforms and maybe the benefits. And it's another whole interesting topic for another day for sure. So let's talk about the future for W Promote. You are the major player in the marketplace in North America for digital marketing, and like I said, you spread across a lot of verticals and a lot of talent in your team. Can you share maybe some North Star, any highlights for 2020 in light of COVID potentially, and how you believe that the brand is continuing to innovate based on kind of this new normal now?
So I think we're actually seeing 2 clusters of, or maybe even 3, but two big ones, 2 clusters of clients. One group are the folks who are really feeling the pain of COVID. Of course, we work with a few airlines, a lot of folks in the hospitality space. We really want to make sure that we are supporting them and finding innovative, creative, low-cost ways to support their business. So even though we as an agency, we've got a core focus on driving acquisition and growth at scale, a lot of it needs to also come back to how do we be smart about the tactics we're employing. course, we certainly want to support those folks. On the other side of the coin are a lot of brands and companies and industries that previously had not thought that there was going to be that much disruption. Maybe they thought, okay, it will come. There'll be a natural disruptive curve here. We'll be prepared for it. I don't think anyone was prepared for this. And I think we're likely to see a lot more disruption come through in the nature of both how companies are doing business and how they are meeting the consumer's needs at different times. So certainly the way we're focusing on this is finding those opportunities, finding those new companies that have opportunities here, and better understanding how our clients right now can be challenges in the new world. A lot of this comes down to our investment in our engineering team. We've also actually been hiring for our engineering team during this time. Our engineering team is continuing to grow, and we're looking to take our data science solutions to the next level. So this includes a number of tools called WPromote Data-Driven Attribution that relies on the Facebook Atlas graph, which is incredibly powerful. Then we apply a Shapley value DDA model. We've got anomaly detection tools, variance analysis tools. These are the kind of things that we're really building on top of. I've got this grand vision. I call it the fantasy footballification of reporting. It's this idea that each week on a Monday, you'll get your email from whichever fantasy football provider is saying, hey, your tight end did so well this week, and that was amazing, totally unexpected. If only your quarterback didn't let the team down. And that's a really interesting email, because it's not like there's someone out there writing that email to me. This is driven by machine learning. And that concept doesn't just have to reside purely within the realm of fantasy football. I think that it spans to everything we do in marketing, and in particular, finding the metrics that matter. What are the relevant metrics, and why did their variance matter to you and your business? That's the place that we are looking to get to. So that's all built on this idea of understanding variance analysis and anomaly detection. So the more that we can have structured, clean data being ingested, the better the insights and predictions we can be giving to our clients so they can stay ahead of their competitors.
So, Simon, we are nearing the end of the show for today. You've shared ridiculous amounts of knowledge bombs, but any way possible that you give us some closing comments or any takeaways that to leave our listeners today?
Yeah, no, I think to echo my earlier sentiments, the best time to plant that tree was 20 years ago, right? The second best time is today. That is so true in everything we do, and you'll never have time to think about your data. So you need to take a pause and think, how important is this to my business? We'll look back on this and I think we'll have a lot of regret if you don't take those actions sooner rather than later. The reality is the next generation of data processing and insight generation solutions are going to require a very strong data solution. So this has to be a strategic priority for every organization. I believe that no company is too small to invest in the fundamentals. Even just mapping the data you're collecting, or even just mapping what you want to collect in the future, knowing what value could come from this in the future, and being smart about how you're going to do it, and then determining if you need a partner to assist you along the way. There's obviously organizations like ourselves, but there are a wide variety of these companies out there that do provide analytics services. I think it's very important, though, to focus on a business-driven analytics team, not one that's just saying, oh, well, we can track that, wouldn't that be neat? But really one going, how does this align with your business goals today and tomorrow? That's the way we're looking at the future, and I'm very excited, and I certainly hope that your listeners are as well.
I know they are, for sure. Certainly feedback I get each week from the shows that I produce. So how can people learn more about WPromote?
So if folks are interested in learning more about us, you can certainly check out our website, wpromote.com, spelt just like it sounds. Certainly, we've been running a number of webinars lately that you can check out on wpromote.com. But of course, we're across Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, and we've got a lot of resources online.
So we did speak a little bit offline before recording today, and I wonder if you could share, I guess, a listener promotion or a little benefit that you wanted to offer today.
Absolutely. So I think it's going to be in the show notes. If you go down there, and it's ecommercefastlane.com/WPromote, and you can go through there and get in touch. You'll find our form there. If you do go ahead and fill out that form, just mention that you heard about this on the e-commerce Fastlane podcast, and our team will do a free 20-point audit of your Google Analytics instance. Really, all you need to do is provide us with that access, and we can tell you at a high level, these are the things that are working, these are the things that aren't. If you're interested in working with us, great. If not, please do go somewhere else and get them fixed. I think nothing hurts my heart more than seeing bad analytics implementations. If my team fixes them, great. But if someone else can do it, that's excellent. We're just big fans of seeing good data.
Well, thank you so much for offering that. Thank you for taking time out of your day today and chatting with me. I think this has been a very impactful show. It's proven, and hopefully those listening today, that you understand that it's massively important to understand your data, make sure it's accurate, make sure that you have some sort of single source of truth for your data. If your maturity is further along, you might want to consider a CDP, a customer data platform, to completely have a single source of truth for all touch points of your customer and revenue and website activity. Thank you again, Simon, for coming on the show. Thanks, W Promote, for offering this audit. Much appreciated.
Thanks, Steve. Really appreciate you having me on, and hope you have a fantastic rest of the week.
This episode is brought to you by the team at Rewind. If you're a Shopify partner, join leading agencies like The Tap Room, Milk Bottle Labs, BVA, and more in the Rewind Agency Partner Program. You can earn up to $1,000 for recommending Rewind to your clients. And as I mentioned at the top of the show, if you're a merchant, feel confident and enjoy peace of mind that your store is always safe with automatic backups by Rewind. Learn more by looking up Rewind in the Shopify App Store or by visiting rewind.io. And make sure you mention E-commerce Fastlane Podcast and you'll get your first month absolutely free. Well, that's it for today's episode. I'd like to thank you, a loyal listener of E-commerce Fastlane. It's my hope that this podcast is offering you a ton of value through growth strategies, tactics, and exclusive insider tips on the best Shopify apps and marketing platforms, all with my personal goal to help you build, launch, grow, and scale with Shopify. Thanks for investing some time today and listening to the show. I'm so proud and excited that you have a growth mindset and are a constant learner. I truly appreciate you and your entrepreneurial journey. Enjoy the rest of the week and keep thriving with Shopify.